Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog podcast. It is Earth Day. So far on the Earth here in Michigan, it's actually snowing. So I'm not sure if that means climate change or it's just cold or, whatever. Maybe the weather, the season's changing, are quarantined. Who knows what's going on? But we've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about more than just green cars, of course. So I know some of you are probably super psyched to hear we're going to do Earth Day stuff, and some of you are already maybe looking to see what the next podcast is. So stick around. We got a little bit for everybody. We're going to talk about the Ferrari Roma configurator. That's cool. The way we all spec'd out our cars. We're going to talk about some interesting updates for the Ranger. Ford Performance kind of got under the hood and found a way to get a little bit of power out of that. So that's pretty neat. We've been driving the Volkswagen Jetta, as in I've been driving the Volkswagen Jetta for my essential groceries and things like that. And we have an update on our long-term Subaru Forester. But that means I should probably bring in our two co-hosts for today. Senior editor for All Things Green, John Schneider. Happy Earth Day. How you doing?
I'm doing real good. I'm staying warm and keep looking at that fireplace thing. I thought I had my last fire a couple days ago, but I don't know. Still feels like winter.
I'm thinking of bringing my fire pit outside. It's in the basement. This is sometimes a good time of year to do that. It's like it's cold enough that you want to be around the fire, but sitting around a fire when it's 90 degrees doesn't really do it for me anyway. I don't know. So we'll see. Also on the phones with us, Jeremy Korzeniewski, our consumer editor. Do you have a fire pit?
I have a fire pit, and I have two fireplaces in my house. And I'm kind of with John on this one. I think it would be a lovely evening to have a last fire of the year. Well, until the end of the year when it gets to be winter, but the last fire of the first half of the year.
I only have one fireplace, and it is gas fed. So that means I don't really need to worry too much. If I want to have a fire in early May, which I've done, there you go. You just flip a switch.
Hey,
nice
real quick pro tip: if you've got a wood burner in your house, go to Lowe's or Home Depot and look for something called pinion wood. It's PINON with the little kind of accent over the O. I always find it imported from Mexico. They're little itty bitty logs. But they smell great and they burn like 5 times longer than the cheap firewood that you get at any gas station or Kroger or something. Pinion wood. That's where it's at. That's what you want.
Okay. All right. This podcast is sponsored by, I don't know. Anyways, so hey, let's jump right in. So we mentioned off the top, we're going to talk about some Earth Day stuff. Lots of stuff going on. I think this is a really, really interesting year. Perhaps never more so to just talk about all the different green cars, alternative methods of propulsion, fuels, things like that. And there's so much going on, from Tesla to what Audi, Porsche, Jaguar, General Motors are doing with their green car strategies. How much of this is going to be impacted by, fallout from the coronavirus? I mean, I kind of wonder if green cars might get scaled back. Does this actually make them more important? Our managing editor, Greg Migliore, actually had a really interesting piece that's on the site about commuting. If we're working from home a good chunk of the time, which I actually think we're probably going to be doing going forward, especially jobs like ours in an office, you don't need to be there every day. What does that do? What does that do for CO2? What does that do for just the state of air quality? So much different stuff out there. So my mind is all over the place on this Earth Day 2020. To maybe bring it back, the Taycan is something that I think is really caught the hearts and minds of enthusiasts. It's a really interesting vehicle. I think Porsche really has, put it together well. Couple, a lot of different content on the site, and I think when I look at it, it's really interesting. We had a drive where one of our contributors, Dan Edmonds, got over 300 miles, and the rating's only 203. So to me, this is a classic example of a product that is sort of overperforming, over-delivering, and it's from a legacy automaker. So I'm curious to know what you guys think.
Well, I think it's super interesting. I know a lot of times, these range estimations are fairly conservative. But man, this seems like really conservative. Granted, his test route is different than, say, the EPA's or what different people would drive typically. But still, like that's a really impressive range. And it's in a car that you could very easily make that range go down a lot just by driving it the way it wants to be driven. That Taycan can really hustle. But it's kind of amazing that it's like the best of these worlds where it can has 200 real world miles of potentially hard driving, or if you just want to drive normally, you get rewarded with a lot more range.
You know what the big thing about the Taycan, like sort of the biggest talking point for me, if you will, is finally we have like a Tesla fighter from a traditional automaker, if you will. And I mean, we've had them in different shapes and forms, the Chevy Bolt, even the Volt at different stages. We've got a legit product from an automaker that I think you could look at and say, well, wait a minute, do I want a Tesla or do I want this? I could get a Porsche and it could do all these things. And I would argue that Tesla still has a coolness to it that I think for certain people, that's going to be the car they want. And when I see a Tesla, sometimes I really want a Tesla. But I really like Porsches. So to me, this is like sort of one of the vehicles that's sort of like leveling the field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I have yet to drive a Taycan. I'm really itching to do so. But from everything that I've heard, like if you're not a Tesla fanboy, which let's be honest, there's a lot of Tesla fanboys out there, and I feel like they're all glued to their internet screens and ready to type some nasty messages as soon as you say something that could even remotely be seen as negative against Tesla. But if that's not you, then the Taycan is really cool. It's like you guys were just saying, finally an automaker that isn't Tesla and is thought of as like around the world as a premium brand is making a really cool electric car. And the one thing that I was like, oh, that just killed it, was the EPA range. But every test that we're seeing, including our own that we just ran, is seems to indicate that it's really right on par with what you're likely to get in the real world from a competitive Model S. So I mean, I think it's great.
Very cool. I kind of, I look at the I-Pace. That's a vehicle I was really excited to drive. I remember when I walked downstairs into our basement parking garage when we were allowed to be in our office, such as it was. And I remember thinking how cool and different it looked in a way that I thought, man, like this is cooler than a Tesla. So I feel like we're kind of getting to this, inflection point where the mainstream automakers can make their like electric offerings as cool as Tesla. And I also think it's really interesting that you have like Tesla, the new kid on the block, relatively new, has almost become the company to beat. At least that's the narrative, So, when I look at vehicles like the Taycan and the I-Pace and the, John, you and I spent, I think, a good deal of time in the Audi e-tron, I don't know, I want to say last fall, maybe. Vehicles like that really get you excited to drive them, not just for the electrical capability. That one blew me away. I was really impressed with that one, but also just for how they look, how they feel. Like, again, I like Audis, and I thought to myself, man, like, why would I need to go try and like worry about the Tesla build quality or the Tesla, like, when am I going to get my Tesla? I could just go get an Audi, So I think that's where I think you're really looking at the field change.
Yeah, the I-Pace was sort of the first one where I was like, oh wow, this is like really an alternative to to Tesla. It is just it's gorgeous, really neat details, excellent car to drive, just tons and tons of grip, really nice center of gravity, really low, and then but it's kind of weird still. It's kind of got a weird shape, and then it had some tech issues. I found the some of the user interfaces, particularly with the infotainment, really not great. But that's not just the I-Pace. That's a lot of Jaguars and a lot of other car brands too. But then we got in the e-tron, and I was like, wow, this is sort of the other end of that, where it's just really, it feels equally nice and luxurious, but it's a lot more sort of mainstream. I feel like I could be in, you can put a gas engine in this and it would feel at home, except this is, just does everything better. It doesn't seem weird. It doesn't seem, out there. There's no sort of polarizing design going on there. In my opinion, I think it's all pretty straightforward. But everything's just sort of, there's an attention to detail, and then the driving experience is just really good with that. It's not quite as sporty, I don't think, as say the I-Pace or anything from Tesla, really. But it's like 80% of that, and that's all you need. And then like just the whole experience of the car and the details, the interior, the design, the technology, all of it comes together really well. And that car, I don't know, it doesn't blow you away in any specific way, but it just comes together really, really nicely and leaves a really good impression on you. And car companies, these legacy automakers, will admit, they were chasing Tesla. They still are, and it was Tesla. Tesla's the reason that they're making these cars, and and because of Tesla, they have to make them really good if they're going to convince people to buy them. So there are alternatives to Tesla out there, but they're out there largely because of Tesla. And I think that's all a good thing.
The thing about the I-Pace, though, is like its size puts it in a funny spot, doesn't it? Like it's it's sized much smaller than any of the vehicles that, like, pricing wise, you would probably compare it with, right? Like, especially if you get into the back seat of an I-Pace. As John just said, the thing is absolutely gorgeous, but those like super sleek aerodynamic lines mean that it's like pretty claustrophobic inside if you're sitting in back, and there's just not a ton of room and space. And for a lot of people, I think the actual size of the vehicle maybe is immaterial if they're looking for a premium European flashy electric car. Obviously the Jaguar is going to fit into that group alongside Tesla, Porsche, Audi. Mercedes has got their EQ series that we're going to be seeing and more of. But yeah, like it's hard to compare the I-Pace with other, like what are its competitors? Obviously, because it's electric, you line it up with the premium electric vehicles. But it's just like pricing and size wise, it's kind of hard to pigeonhole into a category.
I'm curious what you guys think the Mach-E is going to do for electric vehicles.
Man, I'm curious to find out. I think it really has the potential to, especially for we kind of live in this bubble here in the greater Detroit metro area where the big three are everything. And I think, certain parts of the country, lots of the country, it's like that. I mean, those people want to buy an American brand. They want to buy something that's cool, that, maybe has a little bit of a sense of machismo to it. And I feel like electric cars maybe haven't really provided that so much. Tesla, does, but with something with a Ford badge on it, that's like this performance thing, and I personally think it looks great too. Has the potential to bring this sort of mainstream with its price. I could see them selling a lot of these, and people starting to take the electrification for granted. Once you're driving that, you're not really thinking about, oh, this is a electric vehicle. It's weird. You're thinking, oh, this is a cool Ford. And one that people can actually afford to put in their garage. So I think potentially it could really change the way a wide swath of America sees electric cars.
I think the Mach-E name really kind of gets it in there too, because it becomes this like performance, like somewhat like callback to history, like the Mach 1. Yeah, I really think Ford's like dialing into this electric effort in trying to put all their eggs, if you will, into this basket. They're not trying to make it some weird science experiment. They're like, no, it's a Mustang, and we're going to put the Mach name on it. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. The people who are old enough to remember the Mach 1 and be offended by the Mach-E name probably aren't the target customer for it. The target customer is probably going to see Mach-E. It's going to, like, they might be vaguely familiar of a Mustang Mach 1 as a cool car, and that's about as far as they're going to make that name association. So I don't think, whatever, Mach-E, probably a really smart name for it. As far as the vehicle, I also think it looks great. Like John said, very excited to see those things actually, hitting the road in the real world. Also super excited to drive that one. And I think that and the upcoming Volkswagen EVs that are going to start proliferating. I think those two brands, Ford and VW, they've got like huge potential to, I hate to use the term disrupt, but to kind of, in the same way that Tesla's disrupted the premium automotive sphere, Ford and Volkswagen could really disrupt the more mainstream automotive marketplace and really start putting electric vehicles in the minds of people who thought of them as something that they couldn't afford and, had no chance of parking in their driveway.
Right.
So
and I think there's
go ahead, John.
I think there's also a certain subset of buyers for whom, maybe they can afford something more aspirational, but they don't want a Tesla. They still want, like, maybe they drove like a $70,000 F-150 or a Cadillac Escalade or something like that, and they don't want a Tesla. They want what they've had, and now that Cadillac is coming online, they're going to have an electric Escalade, among other electric vehicles, and then GMC with the Hummer, and then Ford and Chevy with their electric pickups. It's there's just going to be something for everyone fairly soon. There's going to be there's still going to be Tesla, and there's going to be more Teslas, and then there's going to be the mainstream brands, whether they're more affordable cars that someone like my family would buy, or something that the person who's driving a G-Wagon around would be driving around suburban Detroit. There's going to be something for all those people very soon.
So it's Earth Day, Green Day, if you will. We got to at least kind of do a quick lightning round state of Tesla. my take is I give them, I don't know, I guess if I'm going to give them a grade, I would give them like a C plus right now. Like they're passing, they're making some interesting products. They are actually putting out some, or they were putting out some like, positive sales and financial figures. I mean, the whole world's going to turn upside down, so it's almost hard to even judge a company by that for at least the rest of this year. But it seemed like they kind of like got it under control. Elon Musk sort of took a little bit of a step back and appeared to be a little more statesman-like, although lately it seems like he's been getting, again, up to his old tricks with some of the things he's been saying. But that's neither here nor there. But overall, the company, again, I think their heads above water. The vehicles they've been, sort of, promoting have been doing well. The Cybertruck, who knows what's going to go on there, but they seem a little bit like less of a basket case than I would have said a year ago. So if you're going to give them a letter grade, State of the Union, where do you guys fall on Tesla? I'm
going to give them a little higher grade than that.
Okay.
I'm going to say B plus, maybe even. They still have their issues. They're still learning, but just the sheer amount of Tesla Model 3s that the company has sold in such a short time. Swiftly going from a very small automaker to selling more cars in a certain categories than anyone else. People are buying sedans; they're just buying the Tesla Model 3, and I think that the fact that Tesla's still trying to push the envelope wherever it can. In terms of technology, and trying to be on the leading edge, I think they're continuing to achieve that, not without hiccups here and there, but overall, I think Tesla is in a really, really good place right now. There's still going to be, especially with the Elon involved, there's still going to be promises that are maybe a little too high that maybe can't be met, or production issues. But going from making a few roadsters out of Lotus cars to having one of the best selling sedans in the country, and now working on all sorts of other technology, battery technology, energy storage. I think it's just really a really impressive feat.
Jeremy, you want to weigh in on a grade there?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a B, a solid B, and here's my thinking. Tesla is, John just laid out really well how they've gone from kind of like this historical footnote with the Roadster to a legitimate car company that on paper, at least, which is crazy, but on paper is just massively valuable, judged by people who buy and sell, stock for a living. So I'm gonna, I'm not going to comment on that because I'm not an expert on it. But what I do know is cars, and I can tell you that the last several Teslas that I've hopped in and taken for a spin have been really fun, cool cars, aspirational vehicles, and I think that's cool. I'm basing that B grade on the actual vehicles. A couple thoughts though. Back when the Model 3 first hit the market, Musk said something to the effect of like it was a make or break moment for the company. And its massive success turned it into a big make it point for the company. I have no inside information here, but it would be worrying if the Model Y, their new crossover, which they expect to be their best selling model, if this is another make it or break it point for the company, the coronavirus COVID pandemic couldn't have come at a worse time, because they're literally just ramping up to get that out of there. And they had to shut their factory down in California, which is where they're going to be pumping a bunch of these out, right? So that's a worry. My gut tells me this isn't the same kind of do or die moment for Tesla as maybe the Model 3 launch was. So there's that concern. Another concern is they can't just focus on the here and now. Like every time you hear something from Musk, he's talking about something that has nothing to do with the current vehicles that they're making. He's always talking about the Cybertruck, which is years from now, and who knows how successful that's going to be. He's talking about robo taxis that the vehicles are going to be they're going to be cheaper now than they will be worth in 5 years, because they're going to have this return on investment, because they'll be able to make you money while you're not driving. Like all this stuff is, to me, sounds like pie in the sky crazy talk that doesn't have anything to do with actually buying and selling cars that people want to buy right now. And I just feel like they'd be better served focusing on those things and having such a really strong base to build off of, and like surprise everyone with really great full self-driving capability when it's ready to come out, and watch everyone react to it and say like, oh holy crap, Tesla, Elon Musk is God and Tesla is the greatest thing in the world. But stop promising that kind of stuff right now. Just build and sell cars that people want to buy, and let that, like, all that other crap just lay off of it for a little bit. That's my thinking.
Yeah, to be fair, and you admitted this, but like other automakers are doing the same thing. They're just quiet about it. You said like just wait and surprise everyone. That's what other companies are doing. I think Tesla, they approach their public-facing side of the business completely differently than these other companies. They talk about these pie-in-the-sky things, and I think that's part of why people like the fans are so devoted. They want a future-looking company, and they don't need to talk about so much the cars here and now, because their fans do that for them. They don't have to advertise. They've got people out there just selling the cars for them, basically. And I think that different approach has worked for Tesla, and I don't know. I'd be curious to see what would happen if they decided to stop promising things in the future and just focus on the cars right now. I think it'd make a sort of a boring company.
Well, okay. So as an example, where's the Semi? Like,
right?
How many years? And they, like, everyone was going crazy reporting on the down payments, and like, oh, Budweiser's buying, oh, Walmart's buying, oh, everyone's buying. Like, it got them in the news cycle and got people talking about them, but there's no product yet. Like, we're still waiting on that. And I mean, Cybertruck. He's been talking about that for forever, and like the latest news story we have on it is, oh my goodness, it's going to float. Like, why are we doing this? Like, what is the purpose of all this? Like, I guess it, like, you could say that Musk on Twitter is Tesla's marketing department, because
yes,
that, like, he gets people talking about it, but it's just so divisive. Like, so many people love Musk and love Tesla and are huge fanboys, but I would argue that just as many people are just completely sick of it and tired of like the constant like hype machine that it seems to be, without like all that much product and not that many sales to go along with it. Like, I don't know. There's a part of me that's just like, okay, like, you want to be taken seriously, build great cars like you're doing, sell a whole bunch of them like you're doing. Like, stop stop talking and parroting and just do, I don't know.
I don't know. It seems to be working for them so far.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm curious, we'll close the Earth Day segment here with just kind of, I sort of titled this like mini lightning round greatest green car of all time. It doesn't have to be greatest by sales, by value, just, I don't know, but maybe a little more curated or reinforced than just your favorite green car of all time. So I'll go ahead and lead off with the EV1, the GM EV1, if you will. I think it was ahead of its time. I think, they did something that was really, I went to the Volt introduction and they literally kept calling it a moonshot. But in many ways, the EV1 was really a moonshot, a decade earlier. I think it could have, had it stuck around, really become as iconic as the Prius. I really think that could have happened. I'm not saying it would have, but I think it could have. And to me, it's one of the great what ifs of the industry. Not only just for its like sort of, its electric capability, but it was a really interesting looking car, that whole silhouette, that shape. You saw, I think, different elements of that turn up in later EVs. So to me, that is one of the greatest what ifs of the auto industry, especially of, the last 30 years. Like, what if GM had put some marketing money into that? What if, like, a lot of marketing money? What if it had caught on a little bit more? What if the Michael Moore movie didn't quite happen the way it was and sort of, repainted history a little bit? If it were me, if I were GM, I would be so proud of that thing. I would trot that back out. I'm sorry, if Hummer can come back to life, EV1 is a name that doesn't have, to me, a lot of negative baggage associated with it. It sounds good. It's like one of the alpha, like, numeric designations that actually makes sense. Electric vehicle 1, you've got, the original electric vehicle. Not really, but you've got one of the original modern ones. So that's my mini rant, but that's my vote. John, what do you think?
Boy, coming into this podcast, I had one thing in my mind, and then, over the course of the last, 60 seconds, I've, sort of gone all over the place, but I'm going to land on the Honda Insight.
Okay.
It was the first, hybrid mass marketed in America. It beat the Prius to North America by like half a year or so. And I think it's just a way cooler car. I think the first gen Insight is awesome. It looks super cool. I still, every once in a while, I'll see one on the road and I just want it. Yeah, they just did cool things. It was super efficient, and it was just a shame how Honda sort of dropped the ball with the second gen Insight. I think the Prius is probably more impactful in terms of public car buyers. Definitely, it's the hybrid that people think of as sort of the standard bearer, but I think the Insight was even cooler. And the new Insight is great. It's fantastic. But yeah, that first gen Insight really sort of is what got the ball rolling here in the US for electrified vehicles.
What I think is really interesting in both of our sort of nominations here, and I would agree with you, like the Prius is like the icon, as far as like, bringing like, hybrid tech to the masses, but just how thin the margins are with like hybrids and electric vehicles as far as like failure. It's like, if you don't get it totally right and sort of catch lightning in a bottle, you can have a good product. It doesn't go anywhere, or you can have an okay product and maybe it does just because you showed up at the right time. And I don't know. I think this is one of the most delicate parts of the automotive sector right now. So yeah, but over to you, Jeremy.
Okay, greatest green car of all time. I really like the vintage Jaguar C and D type in British Racing Green. I think they're absolutely gorgeous.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of you guys. No, in all seriousness.
The Stanley Steamer, the Detroit Electric, if you want to go far enough back.
I don't know. Like, I'll be honest. My first gut response to that when I saw the question on our little podcast sheet that we were going over, like green cars, like the green car movement has been like in the works since the 1970s with ups and downs. With the, was it 73, 74, 75, before I was born, the oil embargo, the crisis in oil, and everyone started, they didn't want gas guzzlers. They, the 4-barrel carburetor was a 4-letter word. Everyone wanted to downsize. You could make an argument that the Volkswagen Beetle was a green car, that, people were turning to those things because they were cheap and they got, 30 miles per gallon. But, like in that way they were green, but emissions were terrible. They didn't have any modern emissions things. So scrapping that, like looking back at like what cars have made the biggest imprint on the eco-friendly green marketplace, it'd be hard to make an argument against either the Toyota Prius or the Tesla Model S. Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to make an official choice, I'll pick the Tesla Model S just because, like, if it weren't for Tesla, we wouldn't be seeing all the other cool cars that we've talked about, the Jaguar I-Pace, the Porsche Taycan, the Audi, the Mercedes, all these other ones that are coming out right now. In the same way that we wouldn't talk about, the Ioniqs and the Kia Niros and the Chevy Volts and all of that if it weren't for the Prius. But yeah, if I'm just gonna pick one, I'll go with the Tesla Model S.
Cool. Very cool. So that's our Earth Day segment. Check out autoblog.com. Of course, to go to the website, but definitely check it out. John kind of curated about 10 posts, give or take, probably a little bit more than that, actually. Past and present. Some have been resurfaced with, updates and things like that. Do check it out. Our green car gallery, like our favorite gallery is up there. Our green car, like EV guide is up there. All sorts of different things. Do check it out. That's Earth Day 2020. So moving along to the news section of the podcast. A couple things that caught my eye. Of course, there's a lot going on in the industry with the coronavirus, with just different things like that. So again, go back to the site. But these were two little sort of like snippets that I thought were cool. Specifically that the Ford Ranger is getting a little bit extra power from Ford Performance. And you can obviously get that at your dealer. It's got a warranty to it. And I think that's kind of a cool play for the Ranger because, a number of us, when we did the midsize pickup truck comparison, that was one of our complaints about it. Now, it did win, if you might recall. Do check that out. But we didn't love the 270 horsepower engine, 310 pound-feet of torque. It was fine. It was adequate. It was a little raspy. I actually liked the torque. I thought that was pretty good. But I know some people did ding it. Like just the raw horsepower figure, while being okay for the segment, people didn't love it. So I think it's not a game changer per se, because one, we're not selling a ton of Rangers, and two, just sort of like an ECU thing from Ford Performance probably isn't going to like go to the masses and change it. But this is a long-winded way of me saying I think this is kind of cool. I think this kind of gets the Ranger to a little bit of a better place. And I think actually when they roll out the redesigned Ranger, it's going to be a much stronger execution. I think this Ranger, we liked it. Ford made a huge deal out of it. There was a huge amount of interest in it, but it's actually a pretty old truck. It's, this is the one that's been on sale, a version of which overseas for quite some time. And then we're going to get an all new one relatively soon. So to really boil it down, it's a nice little thing that you can do, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Like factory, ECU upgrades aren't exactly new. Like we could call it the Ford Ranger Polestar, for instance. Like remember when Polestar was doing that in their Volvos? And that was kind of a successful thing that now they've launched it in its own brand. But yeah, so it's like not exactly something new, but it almost makes me wish that like Ford would advertise it as an actual, because it is certified under their warranty. Like, why not just make it like a dealer installed option right off the bat when you buy the truck? Like, check the option box that bumps your bumps you from what would we say it was 270, 310 to 320, 355. Like, how many people would opt for that if it was just like presented as like the upgraded engine package right from the factory when you buy it? Regardless of that, I think it's great. Like, whoever turns down more power. What I'd want to know though, like maybe the reason they don't do it, and this just popped into my head, is do they not have to get separate EPA fuel mileage certification this way? Like, how much more fuel does it use to make that extra power? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Follow up and find that out, or do our own test.
Do our own test, yeah. 'Cause I think if they offer it this way, they don't have to have it tested, right? Like, it's not a factory, and maybe that's why they do it that way. I don't know.
But you could still get it at the dealer and get it under warranty. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It's a cool service to the enthusiasts of the model. There are Ranger people out there. There were, when it was around before, and there are now people who love the truck, and more people who are going to end up buying them and fall in love with the truck, and they're going to be Ranger people, and it's a cool service for them to be able to do something a little bit different with their truck that makes it a little bit cooler, a little more powerful, without voiding the warranty, and it's legal in California too. 5 years from now, when there's a new Ranger or whatever, people are going to be looking back and buying these used ones and be like, oh, did you get the Ford tuning package for it? And it's going to be the same way people talk about things that they've done with their Jeeps, or it's or their Subarus. This is just a little sort of nugget. I think it's a fan service for the burgeoning Ford Ranger enthusiast community.
It actually bumps it to best in class, barely, in horsepower. The Colorado's at 308, the Gladiator's at 285, as far as the gas-fed engines. So that's kind of a neat little piece of trivia.
And it's really reasonably priced too. It's only $825, which if like 10, well, let's say 20 years ago, if you could tell someone that like, hey, for $825 you can bump your power from 270 to what we say it was, from 270 to 320. Like, that's a 50 horsepower gain for $825. Like,
that's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Bang for the buck, right?
My only concern, like you guys said, that was the fuel economy. Like, I mean, you're getting all that horsepower, like whoa, what's the trade-off? And if I recall, just anecdotally driving the Ranger around town, that thing really, really drank some serious gas, if I recall. Like,
well, the more you put your foot into a turbocharged car like that, the more fuel it's, and if they're building more boost and shoving more air in it, they need more fuel to keep the ratio. So it's definitely gonna be thirstier.
Cool. So let's move along to Ferrari. The Roma configurator was online last week, and I had a lot of fun speccing out my Ferrari. And I didn't actually get the one, or not get, I wish I got it. I didn't actually build the one that I honestly would build, which is a straight up red Ferrari with probably a light interior, because I think like a light, saddle brown interior always looks good. probably wouldn't do as much carbon as I spec'd it out with. But that was just the mood I was in. And yeah, I think it's a really nice looking car. And yeah. Hey guys, we're having a guest on the Autoblog podcast. My son has just run down here. So
he found
you, buddy.
He found you.
Yeah, he did find me, as they say. Hey, if Jimmy Fallon can have a guest on his show, his kids are on it. I guess we'll have Andy on the podcast. Have a seat, bud.
That's awesome.
Hi, Andy.
Yeah.
So, Greg, it's funny. The Ferrari you described is basically the one that you didn't build. Is basically the one I built. I went with red, sort of a saddle brown interior. Didn't opt for the extra carbon, and I think it looks pretty badass. So I went with sort of simple wheels, black brake calipers. I went with the sport exhaust because it just looks cool. I didn't go with the blacked out one though. But I wanted to look like sort of red and classic, without too many frills, and I really like it. Originally, I was going to go with blue because I like blue. Pretty much any time we do one of these configurator posts, I'm always picking something blue. But I just had to do a red on this one, the Rosso Mugello, and I think it looks fantastic.
There are a couple of really good shades of red in this configurator. Jeremy, how'd you go?
I went with a blue color, and I'm going to make the same caveat that Greg made. I don't know if this is like, if I were fortunate enough that I could design my own Ferrari Roma in the real world and actually have a chance of bringing it home. I don't know if this is how I'd actually do it or not, but I went with a really cool kind of soothing blue color because I feel like the Roma, it's got these really clean lines, like much cleaner than anything that we've seen from Ferrari in a really long time, and it doesn't look anything like the 70s Daytona, but the crispness of it and the like cleanness of its design kind of reminded me a little bit of the Daytona, and I love Daytonas in blue. So that's where I went. That's where I went with it. There's actually a really cool option in there that you can choose Daytona style seats. So I did that, and I went with like a I don't even know what you'd call it. Kind of like I don't know, like almost like an ox blood leather interior. So like a really deep red, not like bright Ferrari race red, but something that like I could see it with a like really pretty blue, and that really deep red would just be super classy, I feel like. So that's where I went with my design, and then I unclassed it by adding carbon fiber exterior accents, which I don't think I would do in real life, but since I'm playing with fake money, I decided to go ahead and try. I went with matte wheels, and I went with I think I went with red brake calipers to kind of go with the red interior. But again, I don't know that I'd actually order it that way, but I do think it looks really cool and classy.
Very cool. I was actually just doing quick Google searches on those great Daytonas in blue. Oh man, that's a great looking car.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually realized the color of the car I spec'd out was blue Roma. So how apropos is that? Anyways, while I wish I could drive that car, let's talk about cars we have driven. I spent some time in the Volkswagen Jetta, which is a very nice car. It will also, just to preview this, John has been in our Forester for quite some time. One of the sort of the benefits of coronavirus is we're not swapping cars, so you get some time to like spend, if you will, with the car you're in, and you've been in that Forester for a while there, John. That's okay.
Few weeks.
Too bad. But anyways, I was in the Jetta, and real quick, I enjoyed it. I used it to Here's my caveat. I literally drove it to go get some essential groceries. That's what I did. Needed to get some milk. And yeah, I mean, there's some things that I thought stood out. Like 40 miles per gallon on the highway is really cool. I think that's a really strong number for a sedan in this segment. I think it looks good. It's essentially like an Audi to me, a mini Audi, if you will, in Volkswagen trim. And yeah, I think it's good value. This one was the SEL in premium trim. Came in at just south of $29,000. I'm trying to squint to see what the Monroney 28.8. So it's pretty cool.
Well, it's been a while since I drove the Jetta, but the one thing I remember from it is the door, the little pocket in the door was the perfect size to hold a Nalgene water bottle. So I think I've got a tweet out there somewhere where I do the Nalgene test with the Jetta and pop it in the door.
Nalgene tests are John's specialty. If you follow him on Twitter, you got to check these out.
But I remember first seeing the Jetta at the Detroit Auto Show, sitting in it and being like, I'm not too thrilled with this. Particularly the interior was kind of wacky. But then when we got one in the office, we've had a couple in the office that it started to grow on me the more I drove it. It definitely did feel a bit more premium when it was spec'd with the right interior.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Jeremy.
I'm going to just counter a little bit what John just said, and only not because I disagree with him at all. I think he's absolutely right. But the counterpoint is the only time that I've spent with the current latest generation Jetta for any length of time is a year and a half ago, just before moving to Ohio. I took a trip out to Ohio and I had a Jetta for a week. And it was an absolute stripper base model. Sticker price was under $20,000. And it was the 1.4 turbo. Is that the same engine you had, Greg?
Yeah.
I had a 1.4 turbo, 6-speed manual transmission. And I like when I picked it up to drive it, I was like, oh man, this is like a penalty box. Like it was so barren and just like seas of black and inside. And by the time I gave it back, I was like, I'm gonna miss this thing because it's actually got like some character to it. It's not like, I grew up. I'm of the generation of the late 80s throughout the entire 90s, where Volkswagen was seen as like the a premium European alternative to your typical Chevy, Ford, Dodge, whatever. And now Volkswagen is just like another brand. It's like another choice. They're not quite so positioned upmarket as they used to be, but they still somehow manage to have a little bit of character to them that when you're driving it, it still feels like, yeah, okay, it's a Volkswagen. It's not a Chevy. It's not a Ford. Like it's like got a little bit of flair to it in some way. And the number one overriding memory I have was just how efficient the thing was with the 6-speed manual and that tiny little turbo engine. I usually get good fuel mileage out of cars, like on the upper end of what you'd expect to get. And I don't think I had, it never went below 40 miles per gallon on any like reasonable length of trip that I took. So it was like on the highway driving from Detroit to Columbus, Ohio to visit family. I think I turned 44 miles per gallon out of the thing.
Nice.
Yeah. And even just driving around the city, I was like right at that 40 mile per gallon mark, like the tank or two that I put through it. So yeah, I mean, what is there to complain about that car? Like less than 20 grand, a little bit of style, a little bit of flair, super efficient. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think the Jetta is one of the better values in the segment too. I was sort of expecting when I got out of this, because it had heated leather seats. The rear seats were heated, which I couldn't believe. It was a pretty nice interior. It was a little quirky, but I expected it to be more like 33, 34. Just get into that territory where you're like, well, this is nice, but then you look at the sticker and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't really want to pay that much for a Jetta. But having it just under 29 felt about right to me. So,
pet peeve time. Every new Volkswagen that I get into, picture what a power on off button looks like. It's kind of got that circle and a line in it.
Yeah.
Volkswagen's dials that have the power button, like for the radio and the volume, the power symbol spins with the dial, and it drives me crazy. I've got this OCD thing where dials, I want them pointed either 90 degrees to the right or left, or straight up or straight down. And I also I like all of my I like temperatures on even numbers, and if the radio has a volume, I want it at an even number. If 21 is perfect, I'm going to compromise and go with 20 or 22. And I'm well aware that it's a weird OCD thing with me, but that spinning power symbol on the radio control in Volkswagens drives me absolutely crazy.
I think that's a fair complaint, because I've noticed that in cars too, and yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, what is it, half a cent for them to make that part of the dial stay straight up and down? I would pay $100 extra for that car if that didn't happen.
So I think we've hit the Jetta pretty hard. I will say this: not having, not doing much driving besides essential things was fun to get out. It's a sunny Saturday morning. I went to this restaurant near me is actually sort of selling groceries, so we were able to get some fresh produce, things like that.
Nice.
Really felt good to drive. The Jetta is hardly the Ferrari Roma, but it's not exactly a Prius either. So I enjoyed driving it, and I guess we'll leave it there. John, you spent some time in the Forester, which has been in our fleet now for going on probably about 8 months at least. It's one of our more sturdier long-term vehicles. What have you been doing with the Forester?
It's funny you say sturdy. It's got another crack in the windshield.
Oh boy, again? Okay.
And it's a process to replace it because of the eyesight. We assume it's because of the eyesight. But also nobody's fixing glass right now, so I'm just gonna have to live with it for a little bit. But also, this is really weird. I got in it to go pick up dinner last night, and driving down the street, I heard kind of what sounded like a sloshing, it sounded like coming from underneath the car. Later on, when I was getting out of the car, I dropped my phone down the side of the seat, and I go to fish it out, and it's wet down there.
That does not sound good.
No, so I'm taking it in on Monday, but there's something funny going on with it. But yeah, it's still on those winter tires too, and I'm excited to get it off of those. As much as I think they're cool, on these roads, it kind of, when the roads are dry and not super cold, it feels a little. The steering feels a little weird. It's sort of twitchy and squishy. I'm looking forward to getting it back on its regular all season tires. But other than that, it's been great. I can fit a ton of stuff in the back. A ton of groceries. Normally this time of year, I'd be getting big bags of soil or whatever, and you'd be getting mulch. But I'm not doing that. But it's got, ours has that giant, floor mat for the cargo area. There's lots of little things like that just make it seem practical and usable and livable. The interior is really, it's impressive how much stuff you can fit back there. For the new generation, the Forester it didn't grow much on the outside, but it grew on the inside, and that rear hatch grew too. So it's just possible to stuff huge items back there. It's really sort of impressive. But yeah, it needs a little TLC right now. But it'll be back and doing well very soon. And I hope I can get some mulch or some soil with it before too long.
I miss the Forester. It's a fun little crossover. It did a lot of cool things with it. Tailgates last fall. It's it was good in the snow with those winters on it. We actually have the gold wheels on it with the winter rubber, which is kind of neat. So I mean, it looks cool, even though I know you're probably at this point on relatively dry roads, although it was snowing earlier.
Fair.
It's not exactly the ride quality you're looking for, but it's been one of my, I'd say top 5, probably top 5 as far as favorite long-termers we've had during my nearly 6 years at Autoblog. So yeah, I mean, it's in the near great, if you will, level of long-termers. We've had some really good ones, but we've had some ones that weren't so great. But this one's hanging in there. It's doing some good things.
It is. It would be one that I would consider owning. I would rather have. And we had a podcast segment on this before, but I'd much rather have an Outback though.
Yep.
I'd rather 100%. Spend the extra money and get that. It just feels like a way better vehicle, higher quality, just a better overall experience. But this the Forester is good, and definitely like a huge improvement over the last generation in terms of quality and comfort and practicality in terms of size.
Yeah, we were talking about the Jetta just a minute ago, and the Forester kind of falls into that same category to me as like a really practical, virtuous car that has just enough character and like interest to it that it's like elevated above daily transportation and something that you can like kind of look forward, have some pride of ownership, look forward to getting in and driving every once in a while. And I think that's really important when so many cars are just seen as like a way to get from point A to point B. Having something with some character, with some interest to it, I think is really great. And I think the Forester kind of falls into that. The Outback even more so, but the Forester's still just a really solid, good choice.
Cool. So, hey, we'll leave the drive section there. And should we spend some money? This is it's a really thorough one. Joe in Washington, D.C. writes to us that he's got some criteria. Let's put it that way. This is about maybe 1,000-word email, which is awesome. He's been looking for a car since last August. His '08 Mazda 3 was rear-ended and totaled, so that's rough. The Metro is stopped in Washington. I wouldn't want to get on subway or public transportation right now if I didn't have to, so I understand that. And he's going to need a car, essentially. A lot of different details here, but here's the criteria. Needs an efficient 30 miles per gallon plus highway or crossover. Something that'll be reliable for, better part of a decade. So he wants to spend some money and have a car he's going to like and keep, which is great. That's a need. A want is he likes camping and hiking, so he needs to be able to handle some of the rougher back roads, snow and such, things like that. There we go. Budget is up to about 17 grand. Maybe willing to stretch a little bit for something really good. Here's the car he's looking at closest, and this is the one that came to mind for me immediately, was the 1718 Mazda 3 hatch CPO, if possible. So that's what he was looking at. A couple of the other ones that he's sort of kind of ruling out, but still throwing in there, the 17-ish Civic hatchback, which he says isn't actually a hatchback. It's a good observation. Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, the new Mazda 3, which is probably too expensive, he says, the CX-3, and those are all the criteria. So basically doesn't care as much about backseat comfort or fancy tech. He likes hatchback CUVs. It's quite a great spend my money. Also, it doesn't really like CVTs. We'll kick it to you, Jeremy. Where do you land on this?
Oh boy. I always like to come with some options on these spend my monies. And like when I first read it, my thinking was, okay, here's a person that, like you said, wrote 1,000 words basically explaining why the 17 Mazda 3 is the perfect car for them. And so I was like, okay, that sounds great. Go with the Mazda 3. And I still think that would be a great choice, the Mazda 3. Even, he's talking about the not current generation. He's talking about the last generation, is a great car. So he mentions that he really likes the Subaru Crosstrek, but that they're just a little bit too expensive. They hold their value really well. So something to consider is that the Subaru Impreza is basically the same car as a Crosstrek without the cladding and with a little bit less suspension travel, or a little less ground clearance, excuse me. But it's basically the same thing. If that, lack of CUV bent doesn't completely dissuade you from the option, the Impreza does not hold its value like the Crosstrek does. And I did some internet searching and found that you can buy a really nice 2018 or 2019 Impreza in the buyer's price range, no problem. So consider an Impreza if you really like the Crosstrek, and you're drawn to Subarus, as you say in your note. Otherwise, some options. The GTI springs to mind. If you want to save some money, a Nero might make sense. If you're really interested in hearing offbeat options, Acura made a TSX wagon several years back that fits into your budget. The Lexus CT could potentially fit to your budget if you look at, say 2014-ish, something like that. But yeah, like if you decide that the 3 isn't perfect for you, I'd consider an Impreza.
I was going to say Impreza as well, for a lot of those same reasons. It's a good car. I mean, if you like the Crosstrek, the Impreza feels very similar when you live with it. It's maybe a little more comfortable, but a little, you do miss some of that elevated ride feeling of the Crosstrek. But I think the ride itself is a little more comfortable in the Impreza. And yeah, you can get a decently equipped Impreza from fairly recently for a good price. What you mentioned the Lexus CT. That's a really good one. But my first thought reading over this was also the Kia Niro or Hyundai Kona. But I really think the Impreza is a very, very good option. And that's probably, if I had to pick one to land on, that would be the one I would land on.
I think I'd go with the Mazda 3 still. Not to do confirmation bias, if you will, but I just like that car. I think for me, that's kind of where I land. I think looks good, drives well. That, like Jeremy, you said this was the last gen, but I still like that last gen too. It was a good car. So I'd probably land on that, I think. And I actually don't think when you're going, between these sort of like the Subaru, the Mazda, you're getting a pretty similar, I think, like car, if you will. It's just a slightly different flavor. So, yeah. And final thoughts, guys?
Well, okay, so something I noted, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read through this email, and I don't think that that this person specifically said whether a manual transmission was okay. Mm-hmm. They said not CVT.
Right.
which for the Crosstrek and the Impreza both do have a CVT. But if you were considering a Crosstrek, but just it's out of your budget, then the Impreza is going to have that same automatic CVT transmission that the Crosstrek has. The Lexus CT also is going to be a CVT, but it's like the weird the planetary gear CVT. It's not like exactly the same thing. It's like a Prius CVT, and the electric motor assist on that kind of does away with a lot of the rubber band feeling that people don't like about CVTs. And it's a Toyota. That powertrain has proven very reliable. So I wouldn't worry about the CVT being like a weak spot. Other vehicles that like popped into my head that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but like if you want to take a flyer, the Nissan Juke would kind of sort of fit into there. They don't make them anymore, but they even for your $17,000 budget, you could even get a Nismo with a 6-speed manual and a more powerful turbo. You're not going to have all-wheel drive, but you got the ground clearance that you're looking for, and the right set of tires. I think you'd be fine. If you really want to go out there, you can get an older, mid 2014, 2015, whatever year they stopped making them, Volvo C30. That's kind of like
C30 is an interesting car. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of out there, but it would fall into the budget. It'd be a kind of a premium thing. Doesn't have a CVT, has a fun little turbo engine. But when I was reading through it, I was thinking, just stick with what you're leaning toward, and I think that's still good, solid advice. Like Greg said, confirmation of the Mazda 3 being a good choice. Absolutely a good choice. No one's going to fault you for that. I think it's really, really, really good. But if you're writing in and you're considering other options, and you're willing to expand the horizon a little bit, there are some other fun options that you could look at.
Very cool. All right. So we'll leave it there. Please send us your Spend My Monies. We'd love to spend your money while everybody's in quarantine. Jeremy and John, thanks for being with us this week. It's been a fun show. Until next time, we'll see you on the other side.